keep going, start it off, and let us know like every 3 months what the update is. And I learned a couple of hard lessons from doing that. The biggest one is you can't force a council to make a decision they don't want to make. A couple of times I really looked for a council to make a decision on something, realized they were not going to make it. It was actually up to me. I needed to do it. And I think it's part bravery. I think it's part ignorance. I decided, okay, we're going to go this direction because the feedback I'm getting from other departments and the police department is this would make sense. That was a success I had. The technical side of it, sure, I can talk about that all day long. Worked really long hours, testing out some things that were really cutting edge, tablets that were never designed to run full CAD RMS software, so the officer had access to things out in the field. I had to push on the state quite a bit to allow them to interface with the technology. Same thing with a lot of vendors who were like, I don't know if that's going to work. More than happy to sell your product, but I can't guarantee it's going to work. Mm-hmm. There's that aspect as well, which is my traditional IT job. But the big impact was we kept the momentum going. We kept the interest going. We made sure it was framed correctly. We made sure the Public Safety Task Force had an update every time they met, because citizens would show up to that meeting as well and listen and voice opinions. So the tie-in and the big aha moment for me was this is how you build and sustain momentum on a large project like this that had the simple goal of the police department just wanted to be the cutting edge, or the mayor wanted the police department to have the cutting edge technology and be an example for any police department within that region or even across the country as to what you can do with those kind of resources. Keeping an eye as to what's going on. How's the mayor feeling about this? Does he feel like he's getting the return on investment publicly that he's looking for? And is he allowed to message exactly what he wants to message because it's backed up by the technology that we did? Was the most important thing, and is what allowed it to be sustainable and be able to go back in year 2 and say, these are the annual recurring costs. They're going to go up 10% because of this technology. And the discussion was already had. The council already knew the history behind it because we kept them regularly updated on it. So it wasn't a surprise, and it just made navigating it a lot easier. And at the end of it, there was a sustainable technology platform that was able to roll forward, adapt strategically to technology changes and changes within the town. But the whole vision is still there, and it's still rolling 12 years later. That still perpetuates and still keeps on going, which, a lot of projects don't sustain that for more than 3 or 4 years. They fall off, or priorities compete and take resources from them.
So that was a large public safety initiative. How did that tie into the overall organization? Because I'm sure you had other priorities, right? Public safety is public facing. Mayor wants to be known for something massive and cutting edge. But what was the state of the union for the rest of the city?
So that's a great question, because it was a very interesting balance. The city, even though the city is well funded and has a lot in financial reserves policy, they are, by the expectation and demand of their citizens, very fiscally conservative. It was interesting. Typical when you introduce technology like that, it raises the watermark for the organization, but it didn't in this one, because they wanted to be able to tell the citizens, we spent this money correctly. We made significant investments when it made sense and was going to give it a good impact, but we didn't just run off and buy a whole bunch of stuff for the entire city and claim, hey, we're modernized, we're good to go. It was a problem internally because I had departments that were like, what about us? Why does PD get all this focus and gets all this money for technology? I'm still having to type something up for the state on a typewriter because the state doesn't accept, they only accept it by fax. It's just weird little things that go on in local government, but legitimate questions from departments of like, how do we get that? How do we modernize? How do we get the ability to step in front of council and tell our story? And a lot of that was just guidance from the finance director as well as the town manager. This is what the council wants. I've got a finger on the pulse of the council. They want results in this area, but in this area, they don't see the need to modernize yet, and we need to be able to respect that. And that's fine. That's the purview of being an elected official. You get to set that policy. So internally caused a lot of issues. Externally, it's exactly what the citizens want. They wanted to know that an officer was going to be at their door in 30 seconds or less if they called on something, and that they're going to have technology right there to be able to take the case report information from you, look something up. But you know what? If it took 2 or 3 days for, Public Works to be able to come out and fix my pothole, yeah, that's not a problem. So what the community wanted was very clear. It only led to issues internally where other departments were like, yeah, when do we get to modernize?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so to wrap this session out, can you summarize what it takes for someone to go from the IT guy or gal to executive? Because, when you're talking about CIO, IT director, CTO, that's an executive level position. You're reporting to the city manager, county administrator, what have you, but you're constantly in front of council doing presentations, feasibility studies. What are the 4 or 5 things that an aspiring CIO needs to understand? What the hell's going on? That'll take him from just the tech person to an executive in an organization.
First thing is learn how to speak enterprise level risk, enterprise risk management. And it doesn't mean, hey, we have to buy this new firewall because the old one could fail, or I want to replace this before it does fail. Tie it into what the organization is doing, especially when it comes to cybersecurity. Understand that you can't ask for the moon. It's not possible. That you have to understand that the city can only make this much of a purchase on a firewall. Let me be clear about the pros and cons of that. Or backup or disaster recovery. Let's go with disaster recovery. It's something you could spend millions on very easily. What you have to do is you have to right size it for the organization. Does this truly have to stay up with only like a couple seconds of downtime per year? Or is this something that could have a little bit less of an investment because it would only need to come back up within a couple of weeks if there's a system failure or a problem? That really is enterprise level risk understanding, because they all compete. There's a balancing act, but they have a major impact as to how you deliver service and the expectations citizens have on you. So if you don't understand the give and take on that, and be able to explain it again in a way that's non-technical and frame it with some vision as well, this piece of technology will serve us fine. In 2.5 years, we're probably going to have to look at something else, or we may have to go a different direction. And be able to deal with that and explain it at the executive level is the first thing you need to have. Second is leadership. Again, I talked about the way you get exposed to that, and sometimes that might require you leave an organization and seek out a position in another IT shop. There is good leadership. It's the simplest way I can put it, because you need to have the leadership skills. You might be great at managing technical people. Yeah, but the rest of your organization, they're not technical people. You have to be as much of a leader with your peers at the C-suite level as well as you are for the end user. So definitely stay on top of technology, not only what's new and flashy, but what also is sustainable and actually makes sense for your organization. It's real easy to get siloed inside of your IT department and think I'm the only one having these problems or we're unique. Now, this is where you actually have to interface with other CIOs. You have to talk to other leaders in the organization. You have to, go talk to a software vendor. You're not saying you're going to buy their product, but give them an opportunity to demo what a modern ERP system is. So you have some sort of clarity as to what we could be talking about here. I think the next thing is recognize that the role is shifting, in that especially ERP projects are going to be led by your CHRO or your CFO, and that's fine. That is not a threat. You are not the end user, nor should you expect to be able to understand the complete end user perspective. When it comes to the technology, let them take the lead, but be a good partner on things like that. I've mentioned several times now, don't just speak technicalese. Actually speak real human languages so that someone can understand what you're looking for, and layer policy and the human factor and change management on top of it. We haven't talked about that, but CIOs are very bad about change management. Some are really good, and those are really people you should hold on to. In understanding that change management is a long game. It is not a simple, short training session. Here's the new piece of software and go. So I think the change management aspect is another thing that you have to develop. And I think for a lot of this, you can't just go and get a certificate on this. You can to help you to some degree. If you're like a network engineer and you want to do more and you're not able to because of the organization or the leadership you're in, you really should look at, do I need to go someplace else that actually would give me those opportunities? That's a scary thing to think about in local gov. But really, if you're serious about doing that and you're like, I really want to be a CIO, I want to be effective, I want to be like this person that I've seen, it's just like when people come up through the ranks to become like an assistant city manager or city manager. You're usually going to have to go look at other places and go to other places to be able to get that experience. Don't be afraid to do that. I think that's the most important thing above all, because that's where you're actually going to get opportunities and responsibilities to be able to step up, and someone who's actually going to guide you and help you in the proper way.
Awesome, Robert. Thank you for this session. And we will reconvene in the next chapter where we'll actually talk about communications for C-suite success. We've touched on it a little bit, but let's dig into what that means. How do you present to council? What kind of things do they look for? And again, these things, being able to do that kind of communication is what makes you an executive, takes you from the techie that's fixing printers to somebody that is responsible for the enterprise technologies for an organization.